This podcast is a Believe Network and Siete production.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, after a somewhat of a lengthy hiatus, the one and only Gabby is back. Thank you so much for rejoining. How are you?
I am great and I'm excited to talk wrestling. I feel like we've gotta play a little catch up, but I'm here for it.
Absolutely. For those that didn't know, or actually last week I was away. It was a definitely needed vacation that I needed, but we're back up and running. Episode number 99. I can't believe I'm almost at 100. Can you believe it? It's
That's
crazy.
insane. I
Uh,
cannot wait to celebrate with you. Like that's such a milestone. Such a milestone.
Absolutely. Well, we're here to talk about, the obvious, as you know, the Mr. McMahon documentary debuted last week, I believe it was last Wednesday,
Mhm.
and just to kind of give you guys a heads up or kind of what's going on, the docuseries has been viewed almost 5 million times in under a week since its release. And it's in the global top 10 on Netflix at number 4. So I'll just read this to you to kind of give you some insight on how big this docuseries is. So at number 1 is Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story at 19,500,000. Number 2 is Nobody Wants This, season 1 at 10,000, sorry, at 10,300,000. At number 3 is The Perfect Couple. It's a limited series at 6 million. And of course, the Mr. McMahon docuseries is sitting at 4.9 million and counting. So talk about as far as the impact that this has made over the last almost under a week, but basically almost a week.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the documentary it piqued everyone's attention. So, like, of course, we're
Mhm,
wrestling fans. We know the
mhm,
good and the bad of the VKM, right? We've heard the stories, we've heard the lore. So this
mhm,
kind of gave a chance for the average person to kind of catch up and learn more about VKM, how he got started, the history of it. I mean, I personally had coworkers come to me and be like,
mhm.
"Hey, have you watched the Vince thing?" I'm like, "Of course, I know I have," and
Right.
asking me questions and things like that. So, like, I think it's opening a bigger dialogue that needed to be had.
Yeah, because I mean, to the average person, because again, this docuseries, this documentary was not made for wrestling fans. It was made for the average Joe that may be casual, they may have heard about it, they may have, oh, I heard of WWE, WWF, or wherever it might be. You heard of Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon, whatever you want to call him, and talking about some of the things they may have seen in the news, et cetera, but
Mhm.
not this type of deep dive. So there were a lot of wrestling fans I know, on the old Twitter machine, on all of his social media, that were a little disappointed in it. But I think you have to kind of pull back a little bit and realize who this was geared towards. It's for the average Joe.
It's
When you're on a platform like Netflix, look how many millions and millions of people. Think about the numbers I just read off to you, ladies and
Mhm.
gentlemen. When we're talking about the millions and millions of people that watch some of these, original Netflix series and things of that nature. You know what I mean? So it just really goes to show you the impact this move that WWE is doing for Monday Night Raw in this coming January. So it says a lot in regards to what's going to be. But the original statement that Vince put out, I think it was either the day of or the day before,
The day before.
and I'll read this in its entirety, and I quote: I don't regret participating in his Netflix documentary. The producers had an opportunity to tell an objective story about my life and the incredible business I built, which were equally filled with excitement, drama, fun, and a fair amount of controversy and life lessons. Unfortunately, based on an early partial cut I've seen, this doc falls short and takes the predictable path of conflating the Mr. McMahon character of my true self, Vince. The title and promos alone make that evident. A lot has been misrepresented or left out entirely in an effort to leave viewers intentionally confused. The producers used typical editing tricks without the context footage and dated sound bites, etc., to distort the viewer's perception and support a deceptive narrative. In an attempt to further their misleading account, the producers use a lawsuit based on an affair I ended as evidence as I am, in fact, Mr. McMahon. I hope the viewer will keep an open mind and remember there are two sides to every story. End quote. I want you to go to comment on that, and then I'll have my rebuttal on that.
Um, so I wasn't sure what he meant by things were left out and like the editing of things because again, like there was nothing I would say new presented to me in this
Mhm.
documentary. Like I knew of the Ring Boy scandal. I knew of um the referee situation. I knew of all of these things. So it's like, how did it get misconstrued? And also you have people accounting live situations. You have people that are doing interviews and are saying these things happened. It happened to me, it happened to someone that I know. So it's like, how can yeah, there are 2 sides to the story, but you didn't do yourself any favors by doing this, right? So, like,
Right.
how did you think this was going to play out when you know these things? How did you think this is going to play out when these stories have been circulating for years and years? How do you think it was gonna pay out how it was gonna play out when we found out that you were writing checks on the side and that you had, like not only were you writing checks, you were writing checks using WWE money. It's one thing if you're writing checks from your personal account to hide these things,
Mhm.
but you were literally using company funds to pay off people. So, like, I just I don't know what I feel like he needed to put out a statement. Sure, you put out a statement, but, like, it doesn't change facts. Facts are still facts, especially because they're evidence, and then, like, his sidebars in the documentary, well, statute of limitations, if you're an innocent person, why are you thinking about statute of limitations? Why, when they're asking you questions, are you saying, "I wish I could tell you guys the real story," and you're like, "No, I can't tell you that," or "I'm thinking about sex right now." It's like, that math ain't mathing, bro. Like, you're not portraying yourself to be this innocent person. And I understand that these were filmed, up into, you know, the most recent lawsuit, but even the most recent lawsuit is still things before that. Again, the Ring Boy scandal, all of the scandals. So it's like, I
Right.
don't know how you thought this was going to come out and you were going to be the good guy. I guess that's my biggest question is how did you think that at the end of the day you would come out looking like the good guy?
I will say this. I wish he had the same energy when he put out that smear campaign on the Ultimate Warrior in 2005.
Hmm.
The Warrior didn't have
Hello.
an opportunity to put out a statement about that. Now, again, I'm not painting the man formerly known as Warrior, the late Warrior, got rest in peace. I'm not
Oh
painting
no,
him to
he
be
had
an
his issues
angel.
too,
He
for
had his
sure.
issues too, but that self destruction of the Ultimate Warrior was a straight up smear campaign where you and several other wrestlers took the opportunity to drag this man's name through the dirt, called him all types of things, unprofessional, this, that, and the other. Now, there were things that were fans that shouldn't have known about. There was a lot of inside stuff that fans shouldn't have known about.
Mhm.
But I mean, the curtain has been pulled back so much, but I guess they had to do it. But I thought that was unnecessary. And
100%.
Warrior ultimately sued him for defamation of character and won the case. So, I mean, I wish he had that energy back then when he realized this is a smear campaign and Warrior is being misrepresented. But I'm glad Warrior had his closure at the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's eerie as that was how everything kind of
Yeah.
happened after that. I'm glad he had his day in the court of public perception of like saying, I'm here now. Say that to my face. I didn't love the business and this and that. And it's like, okay, he may have been hard to deal with. There's tons of wrestlers that were hard to deal with. But they made you money. They made you
You
money,
wouldn't be
man.
where you are without them. Simple as that.
Absolutely. So when I read this, I'm like, well, whoa, wait a minute. Like there's been plenty of things you said about wrestlers on all these documentaries that you produced. all these WWE produced DVDs they was putting out back in the once they acquired, the WCW library, when they all these other things, they put their narrative and their spin on it without really telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it was I just like, yo, come on, man. And then I think he was trying to set up, okay, guys, precaution, there's gonna be some things on here. But again, looking at the whole thing, the docuseries, and we'll get in some of the bullet points in just a second.
Mm-hmm.
Us wrestling fans, hardcore wrestling fans, we kind of knew of most of, I would say 90 to 95% of these, but there are some things on there we didn't know, and we're going to talk about that right now. So obviously, we talked about the Ring Boy scandal, and obviously you had was last name Phillips, he was the ring announcer. Was it Terry Garvin that was all involved in that, and that story had been out for years
Mm-hmm.
about sexually molesting young boys on this stuff. And we're now in 2024 where we have this this Sean Diddy Combs case going on, and it's like, well, damn, these things just doesn't happen overnight. These have been prevalent throughout the history of time, but it's like we now have to start exposing these bastards. Excuse my language, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually read and saw some stories on YouTube where the actual people were speaking out, and this was like old footage and things where Linda McMahon was involved and trying to smooth things over, and it
Mm-hmm.
was just like nobody was innocent in that whole thing with the Ring Boy scandal. Your thoughts on that?
So with the Ring Boy scandal, it's interesting that allegedly he said of the three men, one was innocent
Mm,
during the documentary. He made a point allegedly he had mentioned to someone and produced and backstage that,
mhm.
that's the reason why Pat Patterson was able to come back, because I don't think he did it. And I'm not here to tell you what happened versus what I wasn't there. Not
Right.
my position to comment on that. But I find it interesting that Pat Patterson was wrapped up in this gigantic scandal and ultimately he died, you know, WWE. Um,
Mhm.
so it's one of those things where, yes, Pat Patterson was gay. Was it a situation where, like, they made it more than what it was? I don't know. Again, I wasn't there, but I just find it interesting that Pat Patterson was able to come back and honestly, passed away with such a legacy. Everyone respected, everyone loved Pat, even though he was caught up in this scandal and ultimately was fired for it and then brought back many years later.
Yeah, his name was brought up in it. I mean, there had been now again his sexual identity, and he had talked about this on another podcast about how people in the business found out that he was gay,
Mhm,
and the fact that he was not American. He was a French Canadian. You know what I mean? He
mhm,
came to the States and tried to make a way, and obviously, his life partner Louis, that a lot of the boys knew and
mhm.
things. He was, and that everyone knew. So when the whole thing about was it I forgot the reality show that was on the WWE network, or Wrestler's House, or whatever it was, that he revealed that he was gay. They all knew.
I was gonna say that was never a
It was
secret.
right. It was like the worst kept secret in the world
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Pat Patterson was gay. But I mean, heck, Tony Atlas was on this documentary, by the way.
Mhm,
WWE Hall of Famer Mr. USA Tony Atlas, one half of the first black tag team champions with the Soul Patrol with Soul Man Rocky Johnson. And he talked about how Pat Patterson was, kind of reaching for a certain body part on him. And I was just like, oh, it's just like, well, dang, you know what I mean? Like it's unfortunate. And again, it's like you hear about these scandals, and like I said, not just in wrestling, but you hear about it in Hollywood, and all these other these pedophile scandals and everything, and like a lot is coming to light now more than ever. So when I'm looking at reading about this once again in this documentary, I'm just like, oh boy, I said it's been a long time coming. But
mhm,
the next scandal was Rita Chatterton, the Rita Marie, the first woman referee that was in the WWF, and there was a said incident she had talked about. She went on several shows, and by the way, they were with all these scandals going on. Phil Donahue, who was huge back then when it came to those type of
Mhm.
topics. You know what I mean? Way before Jerry Springer, way before Maury Povich, but Donahue and Geraldo.
Mhm.
I remember the time where Geraldo got his nose broken when a fiasco took place on set. I remember
Mhm.
that. Old enough to remember it. So all of these shows were were the place where a lot of these topics took place at. Dave Meltzer was on there, and all you seen it, but
Mhm.
this particular one, I heard about, but I wanted to really hear from the person's mouth, and basically it has something to do with money, and he more or less forced his way into her performing a sexual act to get paid and that type of thing. And you had made reference to the comment that he made earlier about statute of limitations from that has come and gone. So ultimately, you're saying that you're guilty and you actually did it.
Interest like I said, if you're innocent, why would that be your first thought? Would be the statute of limitations.
Right.
If you're innocent, you'd be like, yeah, it never happened. Next question, move on. This interesting sidebar. Like his sidebars and his commentary made him seem like super guilty because like there's a level of arrogance that was there. It was like, you're innocent. Why? What's up, bro? Like, but if you're innocent, you say I'm innocent, and like that should be the end of that's the end of the sentence, right? I don't know. It was weird to me.
But it's one of those things because I've heard about this stuff, as the year, because you figure I just celebrated my 6-year Wrestleversary last month. And when the Speak Out movement took place in 2020, because everybody was home, people had nothing to do. And I don't know if you remember the Speak Out movement that took place,
Mhm.
where a lot of women were coming forward about promoters on the indie
Mhm.
circuit as well as people that you may have seen on TV had forced themselves onto women to, well, if you want this, well, you're going to have to give up something.
Mhm.
If you want to be booked on this show, you're going to have to give up something. It made me sick to my stomach of the fact that these are things that women have been fighting for years, was freedom and equality. And yet men that are in powerful positions are going to force their hand, is saying, well, if you want something, you're going to have to give up something. I'm just like, really? And the fact that Vince was on record saying, well, statute of limitations, even if that was the case, I'm just like, are you
In 4K, you
serious?
were caught. Interesting comment. Like I said, it doesn't align. If you're innocent, your comments aren't aligning. But
So for him to say in that statement that they're painting him out to be the bad guy or guilty, bro, you did it to yourself. You said it on camera. It's not like anybody forced you, put a gun to your head and did it. Because he was saying he really didn't want people to really know him, or didn't know, you know what I mean? Because people like
mhm.
him don't have a lot of friends, I don't think. He may have a
Mhm.
small circle of people, but no.
Yes, man. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. But obviously the steroid scandal, but we already knew what that was. And that's when I officially found out that he was indeed the owner of the WWF at the time, because back in the day, he was the announcer guy.
Mhm.
And of course, you could have had
Commentary.
him in
Mhm.
right. He was doing commentary and everything. Saturday Night's Main Event, Superstars of Wrestling, and he started doing pay-per-views. I want to say in 1990, I think the first pay-per-view that he did was 1990, was SummerSlam. Him and Roddy Piper. That was Vince McMahon's first pay-per-view that he ever commentated on. Because usually he would be in the back doing whatever, etc., etc. But I'm like, oh, he's the owner, and you having all these wrestlers coming, to take the stand, and he beat the federal government, and it was honestly much ado about nothing. You figure Phil Mushnick, who was one of the writers in the sports section of the New York Daily News, hated Vince McMahon, hated his
Mhm.
guts, has been on the record hating this man for years, and it was like he was right. I guess the federal government was like kind of paying attention to what he was talking about, and I guess they wanted to do a I gotcha type thing with him, and they really couldn't prove anything.
Mhm.
The doctor got in trouble because he was the one that was really distributing steroids to wrestlers. He was selling them.
Mhm.
And Vince had to part ways with him. So Vince, I mean, granted, I'm pretty sure Vince knew.
I mean, it's a reason why they were doing it. Like you have someone like Hulk and you have the Warrior who are just like freaking jacked. So it's like
Yeah,
if you want to be on that stage, this is what you have to do to be on that stage. Do I think that he was injecting them? No, but do I think he heavily implied you should probably talk to my homeboy who's gonna give you a prescription and shoot you with it? Probably. Um, you're still guilty by association. You may not be the person injecting them, you may be the person like literally taking money from their hands for it, but like you're still guilty, bro. Your hands aren't clean.
yeah, agreed. And of course, the last one was, the Benoit scandal. And first of all, when they mentioned Benoit, I'm like, okay, this is definitely not a WWE produced documentary because of
Hmm.
the fact that there
I
will be
mentioned
no
it.
mention of him going forward. And it talked about how he single-handedly almost brought down an industry, which he did because it led, for those that don't know, once they did their research in regards to seeing whatever it was that was in his medicine cabinet, I think it may have been some HGH or whatever, it linked him to a doctor in Atlanta who then, once they got the doctor, then they started seeing who was on his list. And
Mhm.
that's when, I don't know if you remember, I think it was in August 2007, there was a mass suspension. It was like a bunch of 30-day suspensions
Yep.
that were handed out because people had failed the wellness policy because they were on that list. I think there were so many. I mean, I think Funaki was on that. Like, what? Are you
Yeah.
serious? Go back and look, ladies and gentlemen. It's true. I remember I was at a Yankees Red Sox game, and I was, going back, driving back home, and I got an alert from, I think it was Wrestling Inc. Shout out to Raj Giri, former owner of Wrestling Inc. And I saw a bunch of wellness policy pops, and I seen it. I'm like, oh, I couldn't believe it. So it really, it was bad. Like 2007 was a very dark year. I want to say from the Benoit incident all the way to the end of the year, it was just like, wow. Like it was
Mhm.
bad just because, obviously the the act itself, taking his own self out, and then ultimately, you're almost taking down an industry. But then of course it led to, Chris Nowinski, former WWE superstar, who was on Tough, the first Tough Enough, who then was telling Vince, you got to chill out with these chair shots, because they studied Benoit's brain, and they said, I remember they said it was the form of a Alzheimer's patient.
Mhm. Of
It was bad.
a very aged old
And this
man.
man was
Mhm.
40. His man was 40 when he passed away. So it was just like, damn, man. Like it was crazy. I remember that to this day, how bad of a period that was. And
Mhm.
then that's when they ultimately stopped doing chair shots. The Undertaker was on there talking, and he didn't like it at first. He's
A
like,
lot of
it's,
the people said they didn't understand it. Road Dogg too, I think, said the same thing where he didn't understand it.
but I'm like, bro, it is metal going against your skull. It is
Those
not meant to
unprotected
take
shots.
unprotected. Even if you're putting your hand in the way, that's still force. I was at Survivor Series 2006 in Philadelphia, where The Undertaker had the first blood match with Mr. Kennedy. And I got to tell you, I was in the seventh row. I had never in my life seen a bunch of people almost gag on how lethal that chair shot was that went across his head. It
Mhm.
was unprotected.
I
And
believe it, yeah.
because if you go back and look, I'll send you the video. You'll just see people in the front row, oh, and they turn their head because it was like, damn, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I'm glad that they got away from that. It is because people used to complain, oh man, I missed the chair shots to the head. I said, are you willing to take a chair shot to the head? Oh no,
Right.
that
Tell me
hurts.
more.
I said, these people are human beings.
Mhm.
They got families too, man. You have to be smart about it. It was crazy. So again, number one, I wish again that Benoit tragedy never happened, because that man basically threw away a Hall of Fame career.
Unfortunately, yes.
It's sad, like he threw away a Hall of Fame career, and he could have been a head trainer in NXT. NXT, we're taping on a Tuesday night, ladies and gentlemen, and NXT is debuting on the CW. Congrats to NXT, WWE. But he could have been a head trainer, one of the trainers down there. He could have been He could have had his own wrestling school in Atlanta. He could have been doing a lot of different things, man. But unfortunately, that happened.
Mhm.
So the Monday Night War, we got to talk about that. how he came off as, well, they tried to take down my business and but you were just saying in an earlier episode that number one, you did everything you could to take down every promoter because you wanted to take over. Like, talk about
Hot
that
meat
for a
kettle,
second. Go
I'm
ahead.
confused. Like the hypocrisy of that, right? Just
It was
like,
crazy.
because you were bored.
I mean, he single-handedly, think about it, because they showed you the map of all of the territories. We're talking about Toronto with the Tunnies. You have the Rougeos in Montreal. You had basically the Northeast territory that went from Maine all the way down to DC. That was the McMahons. Then you had
Mhm,
Mid-Atlantic. That was the Crockett's. You had Georgia. Okay. You had Florida. You know what I mean? Eddie Graham. And then you had Continental, which was like the basically that was Alabama and that whole area. Then you had the territories in Texas. You had the Blanchards, you had the Funks in Amarillo, you had the Von Erichs
mhm,
in Dallas. You know what I mean? You had Don Owens in Oregon. You had championship wrestling, in the LA area and stuff. Oh my, you had so many. Of course, you can't forget about the Hearts in Calgary, Vern Gagne in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities. So you had all these territories. Oh, I can't forget about St. Louis and Kansas City with Harley
mhm.
Race. So you had all of these territories, and you basically swallowed them all up. So it's
Because you
like,
were bored.
yeah,
Mhm,
and because your father knew what you wanted to do, and the fact that he had a somewhat of a love-hate relationship with his own father because of the fact that Vince Sr., you know, didn't really show him that genuine love that you were
mhm,
supposed to show to your children and stuff, because he really didn't raise him. Vince comes from raised with his mother in the trailer park and had a bunch of stepfathers that beat him.
mhm.
And didn't mean to get off the topic of the Monday Night War, because you pretty much get the drift in regards to who won the war and all that stuff.
We know who
But
won,
man,
right?
yeah, but he passed that trauma down to
To
Shane.
his kids. To his kids, both of them,
Yeah,
honestly.
both of them, but I think Shane got the worst of it
Yeah, for sure.
because, I'm going to go to a quote from Paul Heyman, because apparently they were talking about an idea and creative. I think Paul Heyman was there. And I'm going to read this quote because when I heard Paul Heyman talking about the quote, I'm like, "Oh my God, how could you say that to your own child? Your son. He's a grown man, but still." I'm going to read this. He says, Vince finally turned to Shane and said, "Not while I'm alive." And Vince, who was eating something, took his knife and handed it to Shane. He said, "Right here." He points at his heart. He said, "Come on, right here. If you want this so bad, stick the dagger right here, because that's what you're going to have to do to make that decision. And if you don't stick the dagger right here, then I know you're not man enough to do it. And I have to take that into consideration as well. Or you could buy me out the way I bought out my father. And if I don't get out of your way, be prepared to get rid of me the way I would have to get rid of my father, and if he wasn't willing to do things my way at all."
Tough.
I need clarity from you on that, because
Got
that,
nothing for you.
I mean, I get it. There's ideas, there's, things you want to, hey, could we do this or could we do that? But I'm just like, he had, I mean, I believe, could think about it. Anytime he wished Triple H a happy birthday, it's happy birthday to WWE Hall of Famer, the 14-time world champion, my son-in-law Triple H. It's Stephanie, and happy birthday, Shane McMahon.
Mhm.
So it's like, and Shane said he literally nearly had to kill himself jumping off of that Hell in a Cell to get that
They did
hug
not
he
love
had been
you.
wanting from his
Mhm.
father. I'm like, I mean, like, I know you're a parent, you know what I'm saying? And I know you bust your ass to make sure that little man has everything, you and your husband has
Mhm.
everything that, he needs, you know what I'm saying? To get, to do that, to give him that unconditional love. But the fact that you're going to pass down that trauma to your own kids, especially to your son, and that's one of the reasons why. And then you saw where Shane resigned, and that shocked me. I was like, What?
and really hasn't been back since. I mean, he had like the one pop up at a Mania a few years ago. For the most part, like when Shane said he was done, Shane was done.
Yeah, because he became the CEO of China Broadband. That's
Hmm.
what he did. He became the CEO of China Broadband. And even he had talked about wanting to buy the UFC when the UFC was for sale, I think in 2000. This is before the Fertittas and Dana White got involved. Shane had been talking MMA for years and saw the evolution that was going to happen. And Vince
Hmm.
didn't see it. He didn't see the vision because Vince is all about characters. Vince is all about,
Hmm.
all that type of stuff. But I'm just like, yo, dude, I would have totally had Shane do that.
Funny how that worked out, right?
It's crazy. And then what? And the UFC sold was in 2016 for
Hmm.
$4 billion. That's crazy.
Hmm.
Unreal. So I know they talked about, the Monday, the Montreal screw job, and I know we've heard it at nauseum, but there's been people that said, oh, that was a work. Oh, that was a work. To see Bret Hart on a Netflix documentary still had to catch himself from wanting to cry over that. I don't know where you were at that time. I don't know if you watched that pay-per-view live,
Mm-mm.
Survivor Series. My uncle, God rest his soul, my uncle Percy, he would have been 68 years old this past Saturday. He ordered that pay-per-view for me because that November 9th pay-per-view was 2 days after my birthday, my 19th birthday.
Hmm.
And I had been on the internet the whole weekend because I knew Bret was doing the WCW. Everybody knew, because it all came out that, that Raw, there were Stone Cold stunned Vince, and that was at Madison Square Garden. It came out that Vince told Bret he had to renege on that contract, and, we can give you your out, and you can go sign for a bigger deal with WCW. And just the whole thing, how it was all happening. And I'm just like, Bret's really leaving.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, when he put, Sean put him in the sharpshooter, and Bret said, I had to tell him to switch the leg around because he was doing it wrong. Can you
Hmm.
imagine you're aiding your op, as the young kids say,
Hmm.
to do the deed, and then all of a sudden, the timekeeper couldn't believe what happened, and they showed Bruce Pritchard in the back. Bruce Pritchard, no one knew what was
Hmm.
happening. There was only a few that was in the know. Jim Ross didn't know about it. Pat Patterson, they said he definitely didn't know about it, and only because of the fact that he was Canadian. He was Bret. Bret was his guy, so he didn't know about it. And he rang the bell, and I remember watching it, and it just went off. They said, and Sean was going in the back, and you saw Gerald Briscoe walking him to the back. Go, 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 and it went off, and the camera just panned to the Survivor Series thing above the aisle, and I was even saying that was not supposed to happen. I was saying that, and I didn't know.
Hmm.
It wasn't privy to anything. And when I got home and I went on Wrestling Inc., that's when it said Bret got screwed. Bret got screwed. It was a double cross. Then,
Hmm.
and I was like, wow. But then when they went into the details about how Bret ended up punching him in the face, they said they tussled like they were about to wrestle, and he said he just got one shot in. Your thoughts on this whole thing, and then think about it in hindsight now in 2024, where the two of the culprits that were involved in the Montreal screw job are now running WWE.
The thing about the Montreal screw job is that there is no more to say about it, right? Like we've all had the discussion about
Mm-hmm.
Vince McMahon and trying to get the belt off of Bret and doing all of these things. And it's interesting that they had a whole plan where like it was supposed to be interference in the match, and they were supposed to like have
Smosh,
this ending.
Smosh, yeah, whole Smosh,
Yeah.
right?
Um, and then for that to happen, and then for all of those years afterwards to be like, "Oh, no, that was what happened. That was a fluke. It wasn't planned." Even though, like, we all knew it was planned, like
Mm-hmm.
and now as you're older, you hear the lores and you're like, "Oh, no. That was real. That they knew that was gonna happen." How long they kept that secret, not a well-kept secret, but a secret. So yeah, it's just another check mark on the VKM sucks, you know?
I'm actually friends with this person, and Julie Hart, who is the ex-wife of Bret Hart, her and I are really good friends. I've known Julie now since 2006, 2007. And
Mhm.
when I tell you, on that documentary, when she said what she said to Triple H, and I mean, she was dead. And one thing about it, that is the one tough lady that I know.
Mhm.
She's a tough lady. And I asked her personally, I said, what was going through your mind when it all happened? She's like, she just wanted to kill him. She was like, she couldn't believe that happened. Because they
Mhm.
were in the crowd watching. That was Brett's last televised WWF match.
Mhm.
The whole family was there. They couldn't believe what happened. And it's crazy to think that incident turned the company around. I mean, with Vince being a main character on TV, using a real life situation. And this is where I'm going to lead to the to this topic about blurring the lines of reality and, storyline. Are
Mhm.
you a fan of it, you personally, or are you kind of one of those people that say, you know what, let's try to make some money, because that's basically what he ultimately said. Let's make money out of it.
I think that it's one of those things where you never really know how bad it is until it happens, right? Because
Mhm,
even Stone Cold said that, like, he is still himself, just, like, on a level 10.
mhm.
Um, so I'm not a fan of the blurred line, because it's hard for the average person to separate, like, to find the blurred line. Like,
Right,
what part of this is, like, your character?
right.
Um, so I don't know, I don't like it personally, and I don't separate the person from their product, right? Like, I don't it's hard for me to be like, "Oh, let's play R. Kelly music. Let's separate the criminal from the," you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah,
once you're
I
gone, to me,
can't.
it's
I
different.
can't.
I
I
can't
can't do it.
separate it.
I
I
can't.
can't, and it sucks because you have people out there, like, unrelated to what we're talking about, but kinda related. You have someone like Chris Jericho who has the history, who it's hard to deny the Y2J thing, and then, like, you see him every
Yeah.
single day, you're like,
Or
"How did you
the
get
the the
here?" Like,
red and yellow man. You know
oh,
what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah, like, I can't
It's
separate you from your
I
like, once
can't.
you I can't, and I don't want to, I can't, I can't do it. I can't justify these things and be like, "Step in the name of love," knowing, like, you did all of these crazy things in your past. Like, I can't do
And
it.
you wrote those things with certain people in mind. Let's not forget about that either. You know what I
I can't do
mein?
it. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
separate the person from their I can't separate the person from their work or their creative. I can't do it. It's all jumped into me, and I understand, like, "Oh, well, girl, you're grown, you should be able to do it." Nah, nah, I can't.
Yeah, and it's crazy because they were talking about when Sean made the comment about Brett having sunny days, and and Brett, and that's what infused that fight that happened in Hartford, Connecticut, when they went to fisticuffs backstage. And
Mhm.
Vince was like, "Oh, let's make some money out of this." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's not the only time he did that. Obviously they showed a highlight of it, but the Edge and Lita thing, the Edge, Lita, and Matt
Mhm.
Hardy thing, which I was not a fan of. I was not a fan of that, and the person that came out on the wrong end of it to me was Lita,
I was gonna say
because
she was the one who got the heat, not them. They were guys, like, whatever.
she got slut shamed, where the fans were calling her slut and all this other
Mhm.
stuff. I was in Philly for her last match, and they were doing the wholesale, and they had the box. They say, "Oh, Lita's box is for," I'm like, oh, come on,
Yeah.
guys. You know what I mean? And Manistat 7 and all this other stuff. I'm like, you're really gonna downplay feminine hygiene products? I'm like, come on, guys. But but he finds humor in that, and I'm just like, there's just certain things you just can't go.
Mhm.
Like there's like, okay, here's the line, and you're crossing the line about 100 yards. Like, you can't
Yep.
do that.
Can't do it.
Him, it wasn't on this documentary, but him saying the N-word at Survivor Series
Do-rag Vince.
2005.
Mhm.
This was before Durag. This was '05, so this is before Durag Vince. He was just happened to be walking backstage, and he talks to John
Oh,
Cena.
John Cena? Yeah,
And
no.
because you figure John had just released his album that year, the hip hop thing,
Mhm.
and then Booker T and Sharmella just standing there like, please tell me he just didn't say that. I was in my living room with my mouth to the floor. Like, first of all, for all intents and purposes, I do not use that word at all. I don't. And I will never tell another African American person what to do or what not to do with it. That's your preference or whatever. Me personally, that's not a word that I use. It's not in my vernacular. I just don't do it. But the fact that you had the unmitigated gall to say that, and then of course the
In front
do-rag
of Black
Vince thing.
people.
Yes, I'm just like, what the hell? And then of course the do-rag Vince thing. He was off his rocker. I'm like, I
Yeah.
said, this guy was a menace, man. It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Nah.
crazy. And it's like, and again, they could have gone deeper, but again, like I said, this was a piece where it was like, this is really for the average human being, not just the average, I don't want to say casual wrestling fan. I just think for the casual human being that just needs something to watch on Netflix, or it's another documentary. People love
Right.
documentaries. People love the dirt. People love the juicy dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So they say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let's the juicy gossip. Ooh, what's happening with this? Oh, I didn't know that. Do I want to watch WWE now? But then they're going to they're going to Google. They're going to do all these other
Yeah.
things. So in your mind, did you feel that this hurt WWE, or did it give more, or did it shed more light on the company now they're going to be making this move to Netflix?
I think that TKO has the opportunity now to be like, that is past regime. This is new regime. We got him up out of here, relatively quickly. When all of this went down, like they made it very clear they are in no tolerance. This is not, we don't tolerate these things. So do I think that it shed them in a positive light? No. Do I think that, again, TKO, I say benefit from this because again, they ousted him. They got him up out of there very quickly. I
Mhm.
would say within like what 6 months they got Vince up out of there, if
Mhm.
that. So does it make WWE look bad? Yes, but keep in mind that WWE is not owned by TKO. So TKO did the right thing. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
There was one part of the documentary because they were talking about Mike Tyson's involvement, and
Yeah.
they did a thing. I think Stephanie was talking, I think in 2013, and she was like, that was before the rape. He went to jail for rape, right? And they said no. In her
No,
face,
girl.
I was like,
Mhm.
oh my
This
God.
was when he was prime wild boy. Mhm.
Yeah, and I mean, and the thing with Stephanie, and again, it wasn't, they highlighted some things, but I mean, man, to think about the storyline, the fact that she said there were things that they couldn't talk about of
Mhm.
storylines, like the fact that he wanted to do the incest angle with her, which I'm just
Moving on. I can't even talk about that. Yeah.
like, and he ends up putting her in a match because he wanted to do that, but then ends up putting her in a match in a
Before her
street
wedding.
fight 6 days before her wedding. And I remember her mother saying on a documentary, he said, if there's a mark on your face, I will never forgive you and I will divorce you.
Mhm.
He wanted to put their wedding on pay-per-view. Like this, he is an
Mhm.
opportunist, man. An
Mhm.
opportunist, a narcissist. I mean, it's like the fact that you're willing, and I hate to even use this terminology, to pimp out your own children for profit says a whole lot about you.
Mhm.
I don't give a damn how popular I am. If my son or daughter is getting married, that is a private affair. I don't give a damn if he or she is marrying a celebrity or not. It
Yeah.
just so happened that Stephanie was marrying a professional wrestler. And deep down
Mhm.
to his core, Triple H is just a regular guy.
Yeah.
I don't think he's all about that because he's from, a well-off family, but he had family values and things like that. I don't even think he wanted that, something like his big day, to be on pay-per-view. That's insane.
Mhm.
So to sum it up, when we talk about, this piece, your thoughts on it all, and the, I guess I don't want to even say legacy because I mean that, I think that's tarnished, but what do you mean? What does this mean for him now going forward?
Don't care. I think that he's screwed. I think that this is the beginning of opening that can of worms. I think that more will continue to come out about him, unfortunately. Um, but I hope I put them underneath the jail. At this point, he's gonna have to probably die in jail. Sucks to be you, bro. Sucks to suck. but he's out of the TKO. Like I said, my biggest thing is that TKO pretty much got rid of him very quickly. So I don't think they're going to erase his history because he was involved in so many things. Like it's hard, like you know how they erase Benoit.
Mhm.
They can't do that because he was so involved. He was ring announcing. He was commentary. He had storylines. He was wrestling. Like so, they can't go back and erase him. But they can just like not acknowledge him kind of moving forward. And I think that they're doing a good job post Vince era. So yeah.
I love when Punk said to Drew McIntyre a few months back when Drew McIntyre said he was the chosen one, and Punk was said, "Who was it that made you the chosen one? I dare you!" Oh my god, hilarious! And I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm glad that he's gone. I mean, if you look at the influence now, they're doing things, that would have never been done before
Hmm.
under the previous regime. I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad that Kevin Dunn is gone. I didn't like the fact that he was calling women unattractive, all these other things. I'm glad that, I mean, me personally, there's a certain person that's still there I don't wish
I don't
was
think he'll
there.
be around long though. I don't think he'll be around long.
And you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and for those that get pissed at me for saying that, well, you can go kick rocks. I can give a shit. But you know what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So
100%. He won't be around long.
you got that right. So before we get out of here, as always, Gab, give out your Instagram nice and loud, and where they can hear your podcast as well.
You guys can find me on all social media at Charm City Gabby with two eyes. You can listen to our weekly podcast with me and I love a group of ladies called Lip Gloss and Ladders. You can find us at Lip Gloss and Ladders on all social media.
All right. Well, Gabby, as always, I appreciate, I know you're extremely busy and everything. I thank you again. You are the matriarch of this podcast. I appreciate everything that you continue to do to bring awareness to this show. And like I said, I'm approaching on episode 100, and we may have some things in store next week. So definitely keep your eyes on it. So again, as always, thank you. Appreciate it.